It's fun, kids. We are celebrating 20 years of the very first Harry Potter film, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, joined today by two people who, I don't want to say unsung heroes, but people you might not think about who really do work with the stars of the show. Miraphora Mina and Eduardo Lima. Together, they are MinaLima. They are the make the props. They make the props for the Harry Potter movies, for the franchise now, for the Wizarding World. They do all of that, and they're with us. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having us. Thank you for having us.
What was the very first thing that you ever made for anything Harry Potter-y?
Yes. Well, it's quite a lovely kind of thread, actually, because it was one invitation letter to Hogwarts, which, you know, innocently I didn't realise was going to also be my invitation to the Wizarding World, because it was, you know, I was invited to do 4 months or 6 months, I think, on the first film, and kind of 20 years later we're still here talking about it. But yeah, that was the first prop, and without that piece, I guess nothing would have happened to both Harry, the Wizarding World, and to the whole unfolding of the stories.
This is the most, Eduardo, probably the most iconic. I would say you've got the broomsticks, the wands, the golden snitch, and then this, the letter I've got here. You'll know it. It's the letter that he's bombarded with in the first film. It's such an iconic image.
As Mira said, if Harry hadn't received that letter, we wouldn't be here talking about this. So, so this letter, I think Mira is the most iconic piece on Harry Potter. It's not because you made it, but I think it's because of the meaning of the letter that Harry is invited to this wizarding world for the first time.
And this, as you say, this invited you to be part of the Wizarding World as well. When you're making something for such a huge film, such a huge series, how much guidance are you given by the director and the producer and people in charge? Are they very specific, here's what I want? Or have you got an opportunity to just use your brain?
No. We were given completely freedom to initiate all the concepts and all the designs. And of course, in films, it's a partnership, so you work with the designers and the director, and you have to show them, and if they are happy, and mostly luckily everything that we kind of initiated, they agreed and they like it.
And of course, don't forget that there wasn't a right or wrong to begin with, because nothing really existed. You know, there were no wizarding maps or newspapers or letters and posters that we could go and find and buy and borrow or rent. So it all had to be invented. So it was kind of easier in a way for us to just offer up that style and see if it worked. And it kind of did, apparently.
But I think the approach that we had as well, that we were following exactly Harry as well, because Harry was the first time that he has been introduced to this amazing world. So we were doing the same thing. What is exciting? What would be a newspaper? What would be inside the books? And what would be inside that letter? So that was... we were like Harry Potter as well, discovering this new world.
Kind of naive.
Yeah. there were 8 films in the end, and you can really see when you watch them how much things are changing. What was that like for you, making the props? When you've seen a film on the big screen, how much are you then changing your imagination, your ideas going forward?
Don't forget when we did the first sort of 2 or 3 films, not all of the books had come out yet, so we were working really closely behind the actual development of the story, which can be an important bit of if you want to know where things are going to go. So we were having to react really quickly to the film script, which is really the Bible of what the filmmakers will be working to, rather than the books. But I think the biggest change over the 8 films was that everyone, and including us, was kind of learning and growing in their craft. So I hope that we started to become better designers as we were going through the films, and we were learning all the time and then applying that knowledge to the next film. And of course that comes with things like learning techniques or even software. At the beginning in the first film, we did almost everything by hand. It was only later on that we started to use computers and so on. And people might think that everything's done on a computer, but there's so much you can do with your hands and then kind of and a photocopier.
So we like to say that Leavesden Studio was like Hogwarts.
Wow.
And Stuart Craig, the production designer, our leader, we used to call him Dumbledore because he always had the right answer for everything.
Yeah.
And the set decorator Stephanie Macmillan was our McGonagall as well, very wise, and she always had the right answer as well. So it was an amazing place. As Mira said, that lots of people went there very young and kind of grow up professionally.
Not just us. A lot of trainees
through the Harry
kind
Potter,
of, because over a 9 or 10 year period, you can really sort of hone your skills, and so it was fantastic and unique for that, I think.
What's the stage of making something? So, as in, if you're doing homework at home, you get given a list of what you need to do. If you're packing to go on holiday, you get a list of what you need to pack. How did it work for you when you sit there for the third film, say The Prisoner of Azkaban? Does the director go, right, here's what I need, a list of 5,000 things?
Now, what we do, we work with lists. Lists are very important. So we read the script, and from the script, we will create 2 lists. One list is the action props, that are the props that the actors will interact with. For example, the latter is an action prop.
Right, okay.
And we do another list that is enormous, is huge, is the background dressing. That would be anything that's graphic to decorate a room. For example, if I walk in the street, all the signage, even the car plates, everything comes to the graphic design department. Yeah, so the background dressing can be quite intense because you need to make sure everything fits
And fun
properly.
fact is that you don't shoot, most films, I think there's very few, are not shot in the order of time.
No, of
chronologically.
course.
So if this object is, I don't know, gets burned, for example,
Right, okay.
but they shoot that scene before they shoot the one where it's not, then you need to think
Repeats.
ahead. So that's when the lists become really critical, because you need to be very organized about what's needed when, what time of year it is, who's got it, whether it was broken before or after, all those kind of little subtleties that need to then flow through the film.
But a good example is with the letter, Namir, because at the scene that you mentioned with all the letters coming through, you had to make thousands and thousands of different.
Yes, and also we didn't quite anticipate the owls who are carrying it so beautifully in that scene. Found it difficult to lift that because their little heads are only about that big, and so you can imagine this was very heavy, so we had to make some lighter weight versions for the owls, which you wouldn't know unless maybe you could just freeze frame the film. And
Constantly problem solving. How late in the day are you working at times? So I don't know, perhaps when Harry's in Ollivander's getting his wand, if I looked around the corner, would I see you two out of shot, like quickly painting bits of wood? How close to the wire is it?
I mean, with the whole point of having lists is that you can plan ahead.
Yeah.
The whole point of human beings is they change their mind. So as soon as someone changes their mind, or an owl reveals that it can't carry a letter that you've made without knowing that was a special requirement, then you might be doing some late nights, and that's just part of the process.
How annoying is it, especially with a film like Harry Potter where everything gets blown up and destroyed? What's it like for you as props people when you put so much work, so much passion and time into something, and then it eventually gets blown up? And do you need multiples for these things as well?
Yes,
yeah,
multiples.
But one thing that is all the books, all the school books, we have to make them beautifully. We send it to a book binding, they do all beautiful leather work and with tooling and embossing, and they send back to us. And when we received the books, we have to destroy it. We needed to age to give the
patina of history and
so like for
life,
example, Beedle the Bard, the book that Dumbledore leaves for Hermione at the last film, the books arrived beautifully. We designed the entire book, but the book binder put it together, and after we have to go and sand and destroy, throw on the floor and age with coffee to give the sense that has been with Dumbledore for a long time. But so we don't really. It's all about the story, so whatever works for the story, we need to do.
But you said, do we mind things being blown up and destroyed? Well, that's only the ones that you actually see. Don't forget, for everything that you see in the film, there's probably been another, for every one prop, there's probably another 20 things that have been created that never quite make it into the final cut. So that's just part of filmmaking for everybody. For everyone involved, there'll always be much more effort that's been put in that just simply doesn't make it into the final cut.
Is there any kind of tricks of the trade that a mere muggle like me won't know about, that that you learn on the go? Perhaps you can't use a specific paint because it looks all wrong on camera. You can't use one colour because it messes with everything.
As I was the chief editor of the Daily Prophet, the Daily Prophet in the Wizard World has to be aged. So we wash every single page of the Daily Prophet with a mixture of coffee and water. But people think that the best way to age paper is with tea, is with coffee. So just like...
don't give it away.
Oh yeah, no, I can't give it away.
Magic.
So just mix coffee with water and until you get the color you like. But the thing is just test in different ways because you might need one more spoon of coffee if you want it to look darker.
That is that white, you were asking if there's anything which white, the pure white is not good on camera. So anytime anybody wants to achieve a white, if it's like pillowcases and sheets or signage or anything, they usually use a sort of off-white for the real world, and then when it's photographed it will look white because sometimes white is just too bright. I don't know, in here it might be fine.
No, but if the children are watching and listening, if they want to make their own Daily Prophet, the trick with the Daily Prophet is to wash every single page.
Coffee.
With coffee.
And a lot of coffee.
Instant
I would say like 2 spoons of coffee for a glass of water.
And don't drink too much of it because
they'll
be
don't
washing them at rapid rates.
Yeah.
What's the toughest thing that you were ever asked to make? The biggest challenge that took you ages and took you so much imagination?
I think in my experience was more anything muggle.
The normal stuff.
Normal stuff, because everyone was like, oh no, muggle, no. We all wanted to be immersed all the time in the wizarding world. So every time there was a scene outside the wizarding world, we were
like in a cafe. Or don't forget, there's a few scenes that go into the real world, and all that stuff needs to be invented. We couldn't really just go and buy, branded drinks or magazines or labels or street names and things. So it all had to be made, but to look as though it just was part of the background, which is kind of what people do most of the time in our role for films. But so that was probably the most annoying thing, but probably the most challenging and interesting thing was probably the Marauder's Map, simply because it didn't have any explanation as to what it should look like. It told us in the books what it did and what it made people feel or do, but it never actually was. She never gave a description, a physical description of what it should look like, which was fantastic for us because it gave us this freedom to really kind of invent a visual language for it, both in the illustration part of it, but also in the kind of construction and the 3D part, how it would unravel. So
with the Marauder's Map, a lot of that is special effects. So they open it up and then everything's moving, which I imagine must be done on the computer. How much thought do you have to give with physical things that you are making, how it can be changed and edited on a screen and made all magic using special effects?
When Harry Potter, most of the props, the paper props and stuff that we've been tasked to do, still keep their kind of paper quality. I'd say the probably the most extreme, and that was such a basic thing, was that the Daily Prophets, the newspapers where you had the photograph was animated.
A moving photograph,
So we would deliver a finished piece, as Eduardo said, an actual newspaper, and wherever there was a photograph, we'd put a magical piece of chroma key green. And then in post-production, they could animate whatever they wanted in that space. But for the most part, even when the lettering moves and stuff, we just make sure that we deliver what we want, the beginning, even the Howler, for example, the beginning one and the end one, and maybe a little storyboard of what it should do in between. But on the whole, what was lovely about Harry Potter, that even for the sets, everything was so built and physical. They didn't rely too heavily on visual effects unless it was something like Quidditch or flying or, so.
But even there's a scene where the Marauder's Map is closes magically in Lupin's table. That was all done physical by a magician, like a real Muggle magician.
So really,
But of course, the flying banners with the names and the footsteps, those were all added on visual effects. But we gave the banners and the footsteps. We draw the footsteps and gave it to visual effects, and after they acted.
It's a really lovely collaboration actually between the departments when that happens.
Can I run through just 3 of my favourites? Just for your memories of them, really. I don't expect wild stories. I'm a huge fan of the clock in the second film that tells where the Weasleys are. That's right. How much imagination went into that? How much free rein were you given for that?
Oh, plenty. But that's a really good example of us sort of working together with the prop team. So we would come up with a concept, a visual look, but we would work with the prop manufacturers to actually make something that was... The extent of our making is usually with paper, books, posters, anything that kind of has a graphic quality. But something like that, it was a bit of a crossover because the background needed to be illustrated, so it still had to have the personality, of course, that was so strong from the Weasley family. When you've got really good characters, it's really, really much easier to design for them, even the extreme ones like Umbridge and
Rita Skeeter.
When they've got sort of extreme qualities to their personality, then it's great because it just gives you these hooks that you can play on, like that clock face, which was so... it was so kind of artisan, and of course, with Arthur being obsessed with Muggle kind of objects, we were like put all these little scissor handles in to make it feel like it was kind of put together out of something that was a curiosity from the Muggle world. So yeah, it was a kind of a good crossover. I think everything in that house was just fantastic. So it was such a kind of crossover between the wizarding thing and how they would view the Muggle world.
He was obsessed with rubber ducks, wasn't he?
Yeah,
I'm surprised you didn't actually... You don't see many rubber ducks on screen. I'm surprised you didn't have to make loads. Also, I love the Elder Wand, because the Elder Wand is such an important part of the story as you get into the last book, and there's not too much description over actually what it is. It's kind of this thing that you've seen for quite a lot of the movies without realising just how important it is. When you're given a wand that has to be more unique and more special than the rest of the ones that we've seen, where did you start with that, knowing how important that is in the last film?
That's actually the 3D props are more things that would be designed by the prop team.
Right.
So our world is more to do with the graphic application of of props. So anything that kind of ends up as pattern, physical paper props.
Yeah.
Books and so on. I think we only did a few of the 3D props, like some of the jewelry, some of the more...
No, we were in charge of the Horcruxes. So, no, the diadem, the locket.
Right.
And
okay, so wands weren't really your thing.
No.
Oh, okay, that's
but we did one wand. We did Umbridge.
We did Umbridge.
Umbridge's wand. The evil Umbridge. Yeah.
Even like mentioning her name kind of shiver up your spine. And I know, as well as this fantastic envelope, you've brought in some more props with you. Do you just want to take us through some of those?
I'm sure people will remember that. The chocolate frog. I'm sorry, I ate the chocolate.
That's very bounced away.
No, this has been 20 years.
Hence it being
so
a bit,
that's why
a
it's all a little bit bashed. But this is original from the set.
Wow. And there's a much bigger one as well.
This one as well. It's a Christmas edition, I think.
Oh, of course. So these are pentagonal, kind of these 5-sided...
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that was an actual description, but we always tried to make things more complicated for ourselves.
Of course.
Than
and there's something wizardy and magical about angles and strange shapes, I think.
And of course the architecture in Harry Potter is this very Victorian Gothic thing, so we're trying to riff off that a little bit, and so much gold. I mean, you can never have too much gold, really.
Well, and talking about gold, I've got in my hands possibly the most important prop of the whole movie series, because without it, I mean, with this in the letter, he ain't going. This is the one-way ticket from London to Hogwarts. What always amazes me is, these are magic people. The only way they can get in is through a platform where you run through a wall. Everyone knows who's going to Hogwarts, yet they still need a ticket to ride. This is fantastic. How much do you remember about designing this Hogwarts Express ticket?
Well, I think what you just said about sort of, isn't it an irony that they need these physical things to move around and to get their lives sort of progressed. I think that J.K. Rowling was really smart in doing that, in giving us all these little kind of suggestions of unfamiliar pieces that we all know, because that totally draws us in. And it's no coincidence that it was a letter and it was a ticket and it was a newspaper and all these kind of like pieces of day to day that we're all really familiar with. It's not a hologram, it's not like a fairy or something. It's all stuff that we use every day, and that makes it so much. That's a really clever way to sort of pull us into being involved. It could be you know what I mean? It could be like your letter or your ticket. So I think it's deliberate, and that's why we always try and reference kind of things that are, you know, like even the numbering and all the details, try and reference things that are from the real world.
So was our job in the film is to enhance all those like little information that she gave. Like for example, the Marauders map, the description is just like a square piece of parchment. And we said, okay, we're not going to do a square piece of parchment. We're going to, as Miriam said, complicate even more. And with the ticket, I don't think there was any description apart from is a one-way ticket to Hogwarts. And it was up to us to embellish. Yeah.
It's been such a treat. Harry Potter is 20 years of the film now, the first film. It's been such a part of so many people's lives, and you're, as I say, not quite unsung heroes, but you're the people that have made so much of like the building blocks that no one really ever wonders how they get there. And it's because people like you have put so much incredible work in. Listen, MinaLima, the two of you, thank you so much for coming in and telling us all about it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.